Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am here covering the official rosters for the spring 2024 BFL season. And obviously that's not going to take very long. So after that, I'm going to spice things up and I'm going to give my full predictions for the season. Let's start off with these rosters now. Looking at Baltimore, they're coming back with pretty much the same team. They're adding Logan Tolman, a new guy. But other than that, coming back with the same team, we're going to see how they can mesh this season. Montreal coming back with the same exact team. Another team that I would like to see mesh a little better. I have high hopes for them this year. And some pretty major changes with Scranton. Rashad Nicholas and Jahira Seals both retiring. Big parts of that Super Bowl run and overall big parts of their season. They're adding a couple new guys. Eli Bruns, Bryant Ellis, Sasha Vidrini, a basketball player. So we'll see how they kind of adapt this season, looking to repeat. We'll see who their new QB1 is. And Washington here, adding a quarterback, Emmanuel Estrada. We saw a little bit of him last year. He looks kind of raw, but he knows how to throw, pretty accurate. He played a few snaps for that Baltimore team, which was probably the hardest team to play quarterback on. I do think that he has potential to be a very good quarterback this season. They add Joseph Galliano. They add... That's it actually for their new additions, but they are bringing back some players we saw last season. Didn't get a huge sample size out of many of these guys, but they do look like they have some good potential this year. Tennessee, bringing back the same main four players, Jeff Hens, Thomas Goodwin, Kieran Jurgensen, and Sam Morse. And they're adding four guys. They add Des McNabb, a big cornerback and receiver that played a little bit for Georgia. Didn't see a lot out of him, but he does have some great potential. They bring in Dylan Canarvis and James Mulvey over from the Jammers. They also add Pierce Murphy. Looks like they finally will have some players on the field, which is great to hear if you're a Tennessee fan. Jacksonville brings back pretty much the same exact team they had, minus the two that went to Tennessee. And then they also add Jordan Williams and Jay Yonko, two track athletes, adding a lot of speed to that team that already does have a lot of that. And then the big change here that let's address the elephant in the room. Virginia is bringing in an entire new roster. Don't know what to expect out of them. I know that they're probably the largest team in the league, so could be a little intimidating out there where you just don't really know what to expect. We're going to have to wait and see. Georgia bringing back the same exact team as last year. However, they will no longer have Jack Gish or Dre Ball. They do add a couple new guys, Brian Fury, Aaron Reno. Don't know what to expect from them. A little interesting to me that both Super Bowl quarterbacks are retiring. So we'll see two new quarterbacks in the Super Bowl no matter what. Now on to predictions. First things, I'm just going to give a disclaimer. This is based off what I know about the names I see in front of me. Obviously, some people are going to surprise me. Obviously, anything can happen, as we saw last season. Let's jump into the Week 1 slate here. Super Bowl rematch. Scranton is going to be taking on Georgia. Obviously, as I mentioned, both starting quarterbacks for these teams are gone. However, I do think that Georgia is going to end up missing Jack Gish a little bit more. I'm taking Scranton 3-1. We saw that Scranton had other options at quarterback. Maybe they weren't as mobile, but they were there, and they know how to throw the ball. We did not see anyone else other than Jack Gish and a little bit of Dre Ball throwing the ball for Georgia. So I really don't know what we can expect for them at quarterback. You can put Beltran back there, but then you're missing one of the best receivers in the league. And I don't know if they have the talent to necessarily fill that spot. So I'm going to take Scranton 3-1 over Georgia. Next up, we have Montreal versus Tennessee. Two teams that I think have a lot of talent on their roster and haven't necessarily tapped into it. I think that they're both pretty even as far as talent goes. Trying not to be a homer here and pick my team. I'm going to give a 2-2 split. I think that they each excel in different areas. I think that they're two pretty evenly matched teams. Next up, Jacksonville versus Baltimore. Now, let's just go out and say this. Baltimore hasn't really shown a lot of skill yet. I do think that they have the talent and the athleticism on the roster. They just have really struggled piecing it together. So I see no choice but to take Jacksonville here. I will give Baltimore one win, though. I think that when we saw Evan Snow come onto this team, and as they're adding more people and as they get more experience under their belt, and as certain pieces kind of play a bigger role. I think that Daniel Calkins will probably play every snap for this team. I think he's a very good quarterback and an even better corner. We'll see, but I think that he kind of played less as the season went on last year just because they were kind of out of the playoff race. I think that if he plays a full season, this team could surprise some people and turn some heads. However, I do have to give Jacksonville the 3-1 win. I just think that Jacksonville is probably the team to beat right now based off these two Super Bowl teams losing some key pieces. Now we move on to the final game. I think the most uncertain, it's Virginia versus Washington. Washington's bringing back pretty much the same team. We saw them kind of show flashes when they had a full team at the field. So Virginia, obviously, I don't know a lot about them. But I do think that despite the fact that they have a lot of athletes and they have a lot of size, it is going to be kind of tough transitioning into this league while everyone else has played a full 16-game season and they are just stepping in. So I'm going to give Washington 2 wins. I'm going to give Virginia 2 wins. So looking at the standings I have here after week 1, Scranton's ahead of the North, 3-1. Montreal right behind them at 2-2. Washington 2-2 as well. And Baltimore at 1-3 in 4th place. Jacksonville in the South, they are 3-1 at the top. Tennessee 2-2, Virginia 2-2, and Georgia 1-3. We are going to go with the same playoff format as last year, where the bottom 2 teams are going to be out. I worded that pretty poorly. The bottom team in each division is going to miss the playoffs. Top team in each division will get a first-round bye. Stepping into week 2, we have Baltimore versus Scranton. We saw this matchup last year, and obviously Scranton swept them as Baltimore started 0-8. I'm going to go ahead and give Scranton a 3-1 win. Like I said, I could see Baltimore turning some heads and Scranton missing their quarterback, but it's still Scranton and Baltimore. So based off what I know, I can only give Baltimore 1 win. Moving on, Washington versus Montreal. Another divisional matchup here, and I think I see them splitting. Montreal tends to play down to their competition, I'd say, which is a very unfortunate trait to have as a team. I do think they're more talented than Washington. However, I do have a 2-2 split here. Virginia versus Tennessee will be the next slate, and I'm going to take Tennessee 3-1. I do think that the inexperience of Virginia is going to be hurting them at this point in the season still, especially as they move on to a higher-ranked opponent. I expect Virginia to still probably be struggling to grasp the rules a little bit at that point, and they're playing against the commissioner's team, which I would hope has the biggest understanding of the rules of any team in the league. Now we move on to Jacksonville versus Georgia. Great matchup last season. I'm taking Jacksonville 3-1. I don't see Georgia keeping up now that they don't have Gish. They are facing the most raw athleticism of any team in the league. And just overall, if you got to put Ryan Beltran at quarterback, who's going to be getting open against that defense? They've got 3 of the top corners in the league, Keaton Fox, Max Lilac, Vinny Fredericks. I mean, Carbone's only one man if he's the only guy out there. They are pretty good against the run, pretty good tackling. So Beltran, if he's at quarterback, can't just necessarily take off on the run. Now we move on to week 3. I will go over the standings right here before I move on. Scranton's going to be at 6-2 atop of the North, Montreal 4-4, Washington 4-4, and at the bottom, Baltimore at 2-6. In the South, Jacksonville on top 6-2, Tennessee right behind them at 5-3. Virginia is going to be at 3-5 in the 3rd spot, and Georgia, the Super Bowl hangover, I see it getting to them a little bit. They're going to be at 2-6 at the bottom of the South. I believe that's exactly where they started last season as well. Jacksonville versus Virginia will open the week 3 slate. I have them splitting. This is where I see Virginia kind of taking advantage of that athleticism they see on the roster. I think that they'll be pretty grasping the rules pretty well, and I think that they'll come in and they will surprise Jacksonville and take 2 of those games. Next up, Georgia versus Tennessee, another instance where I see Georgia kind of adapting to the new system they're going to be in. I'm going to give Tennessee 2 and Georgia 2 wins. I think that those are going to be some great divisional matchups. Obviously, the later you get in the season, these divisional matchups are going to mean so much. I have each team in the South splitting. Now we move on to the North games here. Montreal, I have them beating Baltimore 3-1. We got to see more out of Baltimore before I trust them to kind of go in and win these games against these great opponents. And Washington, I'm going to give them 1 game against Scranton. So looking at the standings here following week 3, the North Division, we've got Scranton on top at 9-3. 2 games behind them, the Montreal Monkeys at 7-5. And then duking it out for the playoff spot, they will actually play in week 4 as well. We have Washington and Baltimore. Washington at 5-7, Baltimore in that 4th spot, 2 games behind at 3-9. Now looking at the South Division, Jacksonville right on top at 8-4. 1 game behind Tennessee at 7-5. Virginia in that 3 spot at 5-7, and just behind them, Georgia at 4-8. So these week 4 games are going to mean so much. I did somewhat base them off my prediction. We have the top 2 teams in the North facing off, Scranton versus Montreal. Montreal would need to win 3 games to upset Scranton and take the 1 seed. I do not have that happening. I have a 2-2 split. So Scranton will claim that 1 seed in week 4. Next up, we have Baltimore versus Washington. Baltimore would need to win 3 games to get in and eliminate Washington. I do not have that happening once again. I have a 2-2 split, so unfortunately Baltimore going to come up short for back-to-back seasons. They do, I think, improve a lot from what we saw out of them in the original fall 2023 season. However, they're still going to miss out. Next up, Georgia versus Virginia. Whoever wins this series is in. A tie would mean that Virginia is in. I have Georgia coming from behind, winning 3 games, and making the playoffs, just crushing Virginia's playoff hopes. Finally here, final slate of week 4, we have Jacksonville versus Tennessee. Winner will win the South Division. If they tie, Jacksonville will take it. I have a 2-2 split. These teams are just so close. It's a big rivalry, so I think Tennessee, despite kind of being the underdog here, will definitely bring a little extra fire. So, Jacksonville takes the 1 seed. Here's what I have for the standings. Scranton gets the 1 seed in the North, 11-5. Just behind them, 2 games behind, Montreal, 9-7. 2 games behind them, Washington at 7-9. And missing the playoffs, I have Baltimore at 5-11. Now on to the South Division, claiming the 1 seed once again. Jacksonville at 10-6. 1 game behind Tennessee at 9-7. 3rd place, sneaking just over Virginia to make the playoffs, I have Georgia at 7-9, and Virginia misses the playoffs again despite a change in their organization at 6-10. Now, I do think that Virginia and Baltimore could surprise some people, but overall, those are the 2 teams that I see right now with the lowest playoff chances. For Virginia, I think it's just a huge disadvantage coming in with a completely new team. I think they have the athleticism to surprise me, but they're in the most difficult division in the league. And for the Blue Crabs, as much as I think we'd all love to see them make a run, they just didn't make a lot of roster changes going into this season. It's hard for me to sit here and say that they're going to turn things around when they didn't make many additions, but I could see them being a sleeper team just based off the flashes they showed us last year. Now on to the playoff bracket. In the divisional on the northern side, it's going to be Washington against Montreal. Same one as last year, and I do see Montreal taking it again. I just don't think that Washington has the depth to match up with them and go toe-to-toe. Now, in the south side, the divisional, it's going to be Georgia and Tennessee. I think it's just hard for me to pick Georgia right now. I really do think that Super Bowl hangover is going to come back and haunt them. They just kind of moved backwards while all these other teams moved ahead. They lost players, other teams added players. So I'm going to take Tennessee to move on to the conference championship. Now in the North Conference Championship, we have Montreal going up against Scranton. This is going to be my first upset here. I think that Montreal is going to come in and dethrone Scranton. I think this is the pick I have to go with. I've been talking high on Montreal. I was really kind to them in the player ratings, and I think that if anyone's going to dethrone Scranton, it's going to be them. I'm going to stand by my opinions here, and I'm going to say that they are going to the Super Bowl. Now, in the South Side, Tennessee walks into Jacksonville for the conference championship. Now, as much as I would love to be a homer here and say that my boys are making it to the Super Bowl, let's be real. Deep down, I do believe that, but I just think that right now, I'd rather be the underdog. And I'm going to take Jacksonville. I think they are the team to beat, in all honesty. I'm going to send them to the Super Bowl, and we see a Week 4 rematch in the Super Bowl of last season. Montreal will be definitely coming in with a chip on their shoulder. They were talking a lot going into that series, and they ended up getting swept, and frankly, that was an embarrassing series for them. My Super Bowl prediction is that the Jacksonville Jammers are going to beat the Montreal Monkeys. I just don't think that the Monkeys match up well against the Jammers, to be honest. They're, honestly, I think too one-dimensional. We saw a lot of Blair to Hohenschad, and you're going up against, I think, one of, if not the best corners in the league in Max Lilac. I think that you're going to have a really hard time trying to throw to one guy against that defense. So my pick is going to be the Jacksonville Jammers to win the Super Bowl. Let's move on here and let's look at my predictions for awards. On the first team BFL defense, I have Luke Vaughn getting in as a D tackle. I think that he's going to lead the league in sacks. I think that some of the other guys, as we move on to 4-4, are going to be forced to play some more corner. I think that Sam Morse is going to have to play more corner. I think that Jay McLeod is going to have to play more corner, and those are some of those guys that were spying the quarterback more often last year. So I think that he gets in pretty easily. Now we move on. We have 5 corners here, all from different teams that I think are going to make it in. Kieran Jurgensen, reigning Defensive Player of the Year out of Tennessee. I think that he gets in as a corner. Cornerback Max Lilac from the Jacksonville Jammers, already gave him some praise. I do think that he will get on the first team. And then I have 3 sleepers. I think Daniel Calkins of the Baltimore Blue Crabs is going to be an island this year, considering the talent he has around him. I think that he's going to get in as a corner. I think that Brandon Carty on the Washington Wolves is going to get in as a corner, and I don't know if I can even call that a sleeper. Obviously, one of the more talented players in the league. He only played, 5 games last year? He played Week 4, and then he played in the playoffs. That's it. And finally, I have Brandon Braithwaite on Scranton getting in. I just think that he's a very good corner. Didn't really see a huge sample size out of him last year. I think that given that we're moving on to 4-4, we will see more of him this year. I believe had 3 interceptions last year as well. Now we move on to the offense. I have Matt Blair getting in as a quarterback. I think he's the only quarterback that will make the list. It's just going to be a lot harder to throw this season, I think, with 4 people. I think it's going to be a lot harder to move the ball at all. You're going to have to read the defense, which, frankly, I think that Matt Blair is the only one capable of doing. I think we're going to see a lot more interceptions this season. I have his wide receiver 1, Hunter Hohenschad, making it onto the list. I have Ryan Beltran. I think regardless of if he's a quarterback or if he's a receiver this year or if he's a running back, he's going to get in. I think he's so talented. I have Nick Carbone also getting in from Georgia. And frankly, I think that regardless of how their offense runs this year, these players are both so talented that they're just going to put up numbers and just show that they deserve to be on the first team. I have the reigning MVP, Liam Ryan, getting in on the first team. I think that that's pretty cut and dry. I think he could play any position this year, including quarterback, and just get on a team somewhere. He's just so talented at everything he does. And I have Sam Morse making the first team. Probably the biggest sleeper on that list. I just think that he's going to rack up receptions, considering that this Tennessee team is mostly built up of defense. Coach of the Year, I have Greg Fonte taking it home. And I think that the way that he's going to turn this team around and, in my predictions, make it to the Super Bowl, there's just no other direction to go. Rookie of the Year, I have someone from Virginia taking it home. I don't know who, to be honest. I don't know who's going to take that role, but I think based off the other rookies I see in the league, someone's going to have to take that star role in Virginia. Someone's going to have to eat up all those touches. Someone's going to have to play quarterback. Someone is going to put up the counting stats to grab that award. And I think that there's someone on each team already that is going to kind of take the touches away from those rookies. You know, you have Baltimore, Daniel Calkins, you have Liam Ryan on Scranton, you have Hunter Hohenschott and Matt Blair on Montreal, you have Morse on Tennessee, you have a whole bunch of people on Jacksonville. They're such a deep team. You have Carbone and you have Beltran on Georgia. I think that really the only person that could win it is someone from Virginia, just because there's not a lot of target share in any of these offenses. Defensive Player of the Year, I have Max Lilac. Max was already in contention for Defensive Player of the Year last year, despite missing time. I expect to see more of the same from him this year, and I could honestly see him taking this award unanimously. He's the anchor of the Jammers defense. He's a top 3 corner in the league, and he led the Jammers in tackles and interceptions last year. I think that Defensive Player of the Year will be Max Lilac. Moving on to Offensive Player of the Year, Matt Blair. Like I've been saying, I see the Monkeys having a huge turnaround, and I think a lot of the workload will be placed on Matt Blair. I think it's pretty clear he's the best quarterback in the league, talent-wise at least. Especially with both Super Bowl quarterbacks from last year hanging up the cleats, I think that this season, with the expansion of 4-on-4, the quarterback position will be more valuable than ever. Paired with the fact that the scrambling rules have been tweaked, I think we could hopefully see him run more this year and boost those rushing numbers. He was somewhat limited in his rushing workload last year. He proved to be more than capable, though, when he was running. I think that Montreal just definitely valued passing. Overall, I think that he is the cornerstone of this Montreal team, and I think that he has all the weapons to put up Offensive Player of the Year worthy numbers. And if it weren't for the next guy, I think that he would be my pick for MVP. And for Most Valuable Player, surprise, surprise, I have Liam Ryan repeating. It's just impossible to pick against Liam right now. He's clearly the best player in the league. He carried Scranton to a Super Bowl victory, and I think that in the absence of Jahaira Seals, he will only continue to show how valuable he is to their franchise. He's the best man defender in the league and the most versatile receiver in the league. I have him easily repeating as MVP. Thank you for listening. Once again, a disclaimer, this is not going to happen. Exactly how I drew it up is not going to happen. I hope to be close, but that is honestly unlikely. Thank you for listening, and I am excited for the season.